Greece is having an election as well. The radical fringe parties are gaining more and more on both the right and the left. If they don't continue with the deal that was worked out with their debt, you know, it all breaks loose then, too. So there's so many ways this can come apart.
Well, that was Stanley Crouch on the possibility of the Eurozone unraveling, falling apart. Spain's double-dip recession, certainly a risk factor today, but does it mean that all the dominoes will fall? With me this morning is Bloomberg contributor and Dartmouth professor Danny Blanchflower, a former policymaker at the Bank of England. And Danny, do you agree? Could all the dominoes fall here?
Absolutely. I mean, that's been the risk for the last 2 years or so. And what we've seen are very temporary fixes that haven't really got to grips with the fundamental problem that austerity in the way that it's been imposed has killed off growth. And there was always going to be social unrest. And the speed at which the austerity was being imposed kind of made that almost inevitable. And so we're seeing this social contagion, if you like, spreading around Europe. And now we're back in another big problem again.
Well, Danny, it's interesting because you can't see this, but our viewers can. We've got a map here right now highlighted in yellow of all the countries now, European countries that are in recession. It is surprising the numbers that have fallen into recession, with Spain being the latest. The question now is, what's next?
Well, what's next is that if you carry on doing the same things, it's very unlikely you're going to see anything different. I think it's something like 11 of the 17 European area countries are in recession. Denmark's in recession. The UK's in recession. Carrying on doing the same thing presumably is going to generate the same outcome. And the worry is that we're actually at a turning point. This may be another dip down. So there's been a growing call this week from me, Larry Summers, all sorts of people saying, you have an austerity plan, you don't have a growth plan. Nora Rubini's been saying the same thing. Time to get a growth plan. Try to do something about generating growth, because we are headed towards collapse. Seems like the death spiral. Look at Spain, 24% unemployment, and you're now going into austerity from that point. That is the Great Depression. Is
Spain in danger of becoming the next Ireland, a bailout in the works?
Well, I think it's much more than Ireland in the sense that it's so much bigger. Spain is bigger than Ireland, Portugal and Greece added together. The question is, does the ECB and the European area actually have the firepower to deal with Spain? And of course, then if you don't deal with Spain, you have Italy and France behind it. So I think it was always inevitable. If you didn't deal with Greece and Portugal and Ireland, it was going to spread, and so it has. So I think we are in big trouble. I don't really see, especially given the scale of the housing losses, the scale of the troubles to the banks, which are being downgraded, I think, as we speak.
But Danny, I mean, what I'm hearing is what you're saying is, look, we need to put austerity on the back burner right now and focus on growth. But how can you do this? How can you reverse course now?
Well, I think, I mean, if the policy has failed, you have to move forward. I mean, there's another report out today from the International Labour Organization which talks about the failure of austerity and the need to focus on jobs. I mean, you can do that by tax cuts towards firms, giving them incentives to hire and to invest. But governments have to start being creative. Slash and burn just created trouble. So we have to start giving incentives for people to get back to work, slow the speed, and perhaps reverse things that have just completely failed. And the UK is the classic example.
Right, and you've got actually a column today, or an editorial in the Independent today in the UK, talking about how, you know, everything you've talked about the United Kingdom, and that it's going to slip into recession, a double-dip recession again. All of that has happened, and now there's talk about putting, you know, new policymakers into place. And Jim O'Neill, who I know you know very well at Goldman Sachs, is being talked about as a possible replacement for Mervyn King, who's the Bank of England governor.
Well, I think we have to put this all in context. I mean, Spain, the troubles we've talked about, it doesn't have its central bank, as Mike McKee would say. It doesn't have its own currency. We actually have the UK, which does. It has the ability to depreciate its currency and do QE. And so you have to say, let's look at the policymakers who are in place. Let's look at the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's making fiscal policy. Let's look at the people at the Bank of England. The same people are still in place that actually didn't see the recession in the first place. So the argument about who replaces Mervyn King is that you need to sweep clean. You need to change the culture at the Bank of England. You need to bring in different people.
Do you think that Jim O'Neill
is the right certainly
person?
a very... Well, I didn't say he was the right person. I said I'm not going to choose between candidates, but I think people who have experience of banking, the days of the theoretical economists are over. What we need are people who understand about how banks work. And the new role of the Bank of England is to be a regulator and monetary policy. So you're probably going to need a chairman who's run a big organisation, probably a bank, and can bring consensus together and raise morale, in contrast to Mervyn King, who did the opposite.
Right.
So I think there are real candidates like Stephen Green, John Varley, Gus O'Donnell, and Jim O'Neill clearly is in there. Major amounts of experience. He's very different to Mervyn King, and that's what we need.
Danny, thank you. I appreciate it. And, of course, our conversation won't stop here. Danny will be joining me on my radio program In the Loop at the Half today at 12 noon Eastern Time. Be sure to tune in to Bloomberg Radio, 11:30 a.m. WBBR, and Sirius XM Channel 113.